So very different. Britain and Ireland have so much more of a shared focus in achieving reconciliation and putting that era behind us. We now have people like Martin McGuinness, a former IRA commander, who's there right at the heart of the devolved government in Northern Ireland. And seeing him, of course, tonight at that banquet alongside the Queen is a reminder of just how far we have come. A reminder too of how significant was that visit of the Queen to the Republic of Ireland a couple of years ago, because it is interesting how many people have said that that was a hugely important moment in bringing about a real sea change in the relations between Britain and Ireland.
And a remarkable change, as you suggest, and as this whole visit illustrates, Carol. But there are some. They've been talking on media outlets today who are more than uncomfortable with the fact that, as you say, Martin McGuinness, for example, will be there, present at the state banquet tonight. For some people, that is just not something they can stomach.
That's right. So many people have been touched personally by the violence. So many people are still grieving for lost friends and relatives, and will feel that they still have a right to some sort of justice for that. That is why it has been so difficult to try to make a proper set of decisions on exactly how to deal with those events of the past. We can just see, as we're talking, many of the other guests arriving here. And you're right, those who have lost loved ones do find it very difficult to stomach the idea of Martin McGuinness, a former IRA commander, sitting down at a state banquet with the Queen. I think what there is in the Irish Republic, in Northern Ireland and in Britain is a shared sense that there is a need to decide how to deal with those issues, but they are hugely sensitive. If you remember, there was the enormous controversy after it emerged from a trial that letters had been sent to some of those who were suspected of involvement in past terrorist crimes, letters sent out to them telling them that they would not be subject to prosecutions. That sparked a huge controversy and was a further reminder of just how difficult these issues are. But interesting, as we sit there, we can see David Cameron, William Hague, the opposition leader, Ed Miliband, all sitting there together, awaiting the arrival of the Irish president. They're getting to their feet now, and it looks as though events may be about to unfold.
Yes, there is the Irish president just walking into the room with the Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, and we think that he will make the formal introduction before President Michael D. Higgins makes his address.
Parliamentary colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege and pleasure to introduce Michael D. Higgins, President of Ireland, to this audience. Of course, the word historic is now perhaps a hackneyed one, but it is clearly an appropriate term on this occasion. For what we shall witness today is at the very heart of the first state visit of an Irish president to this country, an event that would have been very difficult to imagine a few decades ago. It is a telling testament to the extraordinary transformation of the relationship between and within these islands in our lifetimes that our children, both in the United Kingdom and in Ireland, would be so surprised about the enormity of this moment. The truth is that the past 8 centuries or so, never mind the past 100 years, have often been fraught with troubles for this shared corner of northwestern Europe surrounded by water. Division has often been the order of the hour. Mutual suspicion, the currency of our dealings. We have in one sense shared so much history, but in another been so separated by it. The past is a powerful force, but we should not allow ourselves to become the prisoners of it. The progress made in Northern Ireland over the past 20 years, for all its imperfections, some of which still persist, should serve as an eternal reminder that with sufficient determination on all sides, progress can be both achieved and entrenched. In the end, it should be not our history, but our humanity which determines our future. This state visit, like that of Her Majesty the Queen to the Republic of Ireland in 2011, is further evidence of the reconciliation that has been and must continue to be the hallmark of our era. It may be described as symbolic, but in this case, there is real substance wrapped inside the symbolism. We are now natural, political, economic, and social partners, and all three themes will doubtless be highlighted during your presence with your wife Sabina in this country. Mr. President, you could not be more welcome here than you are. It will also be an opportunity for you to demonstrate the many virtues which explain why you were elected president with the largest number of votes for an individual ever recorded in Ireland. You are described as a politician and a poet, an academic and a commentator, an author and a broadcaster. You have been a mayor and a minister and served in both the Dáil and the Senate. You have taken an intense and enduring interest in matters as diverse as the local football team and human rights internationally. You are clearly a president in the spirit of Yeats, as befits your nation. Yet in our time, despite some of his most famous words, the centre has held and so has made possible the new relationship between our two countries and hence your presence here in our Parliament. President Higgins, we would be honoured if you would now address us.
Mr. Speaker, Lord Speaker, Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition and distinguished guests, I'm absolutely delighted to be with you today. This is my first visit back to a Parliament since I was inaugurated. A cóide, tá fircin áhasar an bhein seolibh an céad lá den cuairt ifigúil go dtí an Stáitse. On the first day of this state visit, I have been graciously and warmly welcomed by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth at Windsor Castle. And I've come to this place from a poignant and uplifting visit to Westminster Abbey. I am greatly honoured, indeed, Mr. Speaker, to be the first President of Ireland to address you in this distinguished Palace of Westminster. As a former parliamentarian, honoured to have spent 25 years as a member of Dáil Éireann and a further decade serving in our upper house Shannon, it constitutes a very special privilege to be speaking today in a place that history has made synonymous with the principle of democratic governance and with respect for a political discourse that is both inclusive and pluralist. At the very foundation of British democracy is, of course, the Magna Carta, which includes the powerful statement, "To no one will we sell, to no one will we deny or delay right or justice." Those beautiful and striking words have echoed down the centuries, and they remain the beating heart of the democratic tradition. Their resonance was felt almost immediately in Ireland through the Magna Carta Hiberniae, a version of the original charter reissued by the guardians of the young Henry III in November 1216. They are also words which echo with a particular significance when we have indeed so recently seen the adverse consequences of a discourse that regards politics, society, and the economy as somehow separate, each from the other. This is a divisive perspective which undermines the essential relationship between the citizen and the state. Today, as both our countries work to build sustainable economies and humane and flourishing societies, we would do well to recall the words of the Magna Carta and its challenge to embrace a concept of citizenship rooted in the principles of active participation, justice, and freedom. Such a vision of citizenship is shared by our two peoples. It is here in this historic building that over the centuries the will of the British people gradually found its full democratic voice. It is inspiring to stand in a place where for more than a century many hundreds of dedicated parliamentarians, in their different ways, represented the interests and the aspirations of the Irish people. Next month marks the centenary of the passing of the Home Rule Act by the House of Commons, a landmark in our shared history. It was also here that the votes of Irish nationalist members of Parliament in 1911 were instrumental in the passage of the Parliament Act, a critical step in the development of your parliamentary system. History was also made here in 1918, when the Irish electorate chose the first woman to be elected to this parliament, Constance Markievicz, who of course chose not to take her Westminster seat, but rather to represent her constituents in our independent parliament. The first Dáil and Constance's sister, Eva Gore Booth, who is buried in Hampstead, had been making and would continue to make her own distinctive contribution to history, not only in the Irish nationalist struggle, but as part of the suffragette and labour movements in Britain. Nearly 90 years earlier, the passage of the Catholic Emancipation Act of 1829 was secured by the leadership of our great Irish parliamentarian, Daniel O'Connell. O'Connell's nationalism set no border to his concern for human rights. His advocacy extended to causes and movements for justice around the world, including the struggle to end slavery. He was totally dedicated to seeking freedom, as he put it, attained not by the effusion of human blood, but by the constitutional combination of good and wise men. While O'Connell may not have achieved that ambition during his own lifetime, it was such an idealism that served to guide and influence so many years later the achievement of the momentous Good Friday Agreement of 1998. That achievement was founded on the cornerstones of equality, justice, and democratic partnership, and was a key milestone on the road to today's warm, deep, and enduring Irish-British friendship. Our two countries can take immense pride in the progress of the cause of peace in Northern Ireland. But of course, there is still a road to be travelled, the road of a lasting and creative reconciliation. And our two governments have a shared responsibility to encourage and support those who need to complete the journey of making peace permanent and constructive, enduring. Mr. Speaker, Lord Speaker, I stand here at a time when the relationship between our two islands has, as I have said, achieved a closeness and warmth that once seemed unachievable. The people of Ireland greatly cherished the political independence that was secured in 1922, an independence which was fought for by my father and many of his generation. The pain and sacrifice associated with the advent of Irish independence inevitably casts its long shadow across our relations, causing us, in the words of the Irish MP Stephen Gwynn, to look at each other with doubtful eyes. We acknowledge that past, but as you have said, even more, we wholeheartedly welcome the considerable achievement of today's reality, the mutual respect, friendship and cooperation which exists between our two countries, our two peoples. That benign reality was brought into sharp relief by the historic visit of Queen Elizabeth to Ireland 3 years ago. Her Majesty's visit eloquently expressed how far we have come in understanding and respecting our differences, and it demonstrated that we could now look at each other through trusting eyes of mutual respect and shared commitments. The ties between us are now strong and resolute. Formidable flows of trade and investment across the Irish Sea confer mutual benefit on our two countries, be it in tourism, sport and culture. Our people-to-people connections have never been so close or abundant, interdependent. Generations of Irish immigrants have made their mark on the development of this country. And as someone whose own siblings made their home here at the end of the 1950s, I am very proud of the large Irish community that is represented in every walk of life in the United Kingdom. That community is the living heart in the evolving British-Irish relationship. I greatly cherish how the Irish in Britain have preserved and nurtured their culture and heritage, while at the same time making a distinctive and valued contribution to the development of modern Britain. Mr. Speaker, Lord Speaker, as both our islands enter periods of important centenaries, we can and must reflect on the ethical importance of respecting different but deeply interwoven narratives. Such reflection will offer us an opportunity to craft a bright future on the extensive common ground we share, and where we differ in matters of interpretation, to have respectful empathy for each other's perspectives. This year, the United Kingdom commemorates the First World War. In Ireland, too, we remember the large number of our countrymen who entered the battlefields of Europe never to return home. Amongst those was the Irish nationalist MP Tom Kettle, who wrote that this tragedy of Europe may be and must be the prologue to the two reconciliations of which all statesmen have dreamed, the reconciliation of Protestant Ulster with Ireland and the reconciliation of Ireland with Great Britain. It is, I think, significant that Kettle refers to this tragedy of Europe. We must always remember that this brutal and tragic war laid the hand of death on every country in Europe. Kettle died as an Irish patriot, a British soldier, and a true European. He understood that to be authentically Irish, we must also embrace our European identity. It is an identification we proudly claim today, an identification we share with the United Kingdom, with whom we have sat around the negotiating table in Europe for over 40 years. We recognise that it has been in that European context of mutuality and interdependence that we took the most significant steps towards each other. Mr. Speaker, Lord Speaker, I've been struck by the imposing canvases in this room, these depictions of the battles of Trafalgar and Waterloo, painted by the Irishman Daniel Macleish. They call to mind another famous painting by this great artist that hangs in the National Gallery in Dublin. It depicts the 12th century marriage of Aoife, daughter of the King of Leinster, to Strongbow, the leader of the first Anglo-Norman force to arrive in Ireland. Those nuptials took place in the context of conflict and did not necessarily become a harbinger of harmony. Neither was there to be a marriage of hearts and minds between our two islands in the following centuries. Today, however, we have a fresh canvas on which to sketch our shared hopes and to advance our overlapping ambitions. What we now enjoy between Ireland and Britain is a friendly, cooperative partnership based on mutual respect, reciprocal benefit, and deep and indelible personal links that bind us together in cultural and social terms. In the final days of his life, the soldier and parliamentarian to whom I've referred, Tom Kettle, dreamed of a new era of friendship between our two peoples. And he wrote, "Free, we are free to be your friend," was how he put it in one of his poems. The journey then of our shared British-Irish relationship towards that freedom has progressed from the doubting eyes of estrangement to the trusting eyes of partnership, and in recent years to the welcoming eyes of friendship. So I am conscious that I am in the company here of so many distinguished parliamentarians who have made their own individual contributions to the journey that we have travelled together. I acknowledge them and I salute them, as I acknowledge and salute all those who have selflessly worked to build concord between our peoples. I celebrate our warm friendship, and I look forward with confidence to a future in which that friendship can grow, even more resolute and more productive. Gur fada gawig pobl agus parlamenti on da ilian shali chéile go siacanta, go sienfa agus sacadas bund lute either ere agus an bret. Long may our two peoples and their parliaments work together in peace, prosperity, and ever closer friendship between Ireland and Britain. Mr. Speaker, members, thank you again for your kind welcome. Gur mila mahaik glare is banner.
There we have it, the crowd in the Royal Gallery standing to applaud the Irish President Michael D. Higgins after that extraordinary and historic speech. The Prime Minister there, the Leader of the Opposition, the Foreign Secretary, many other former Northern Ireland Secretaries of State. Amongst those historic paintings depicting, amongst other things, Battle of Waterloo and so on, we have a fresh canvas on which to sketch our shared hopes and advance our overlapping ambitions, was the words of the President. And he talked there about how the violence of the past had led to the doubting eyes between the British and the Irish. And there was an extraordinary phrase, perhaps showing his poetic past from Michael D. Higgins, when he said how the journey of our shared British-Irish relationship has progressed from the doubting eyes of estrangement to the trusting eyes of partnership, and in recent years to the welcoming eyes of friendship. There was a lot of reference there to the history between the two countries. He talked, of course, of the various acts of Parliament which had shaped Ireland's history, as well as that of the relations between Britain and Ireland. And he talked too of the cultural ties of the many Irish citizens who now live here in Britain, of the developing trade links, and of course he touched on their troubled past. It was a fascinating and an eloquent and a poetic speech, listened to by so many senior parliamentarians. Interesting too that he talked specifically about the role of the Queen, about her visit to Dublin, about how much difference that had made to the changing in the relationship between the two countries. And of course from here he's going to go on back to that state banquet, an extraordinary event which will bring together Martin McGuinness, a former IRA commander, sitting down with the great and good of the land in the lavish surroundings of the state banquet. But that speech to both Houses of Parliament, I think the resonance of that will clearly be felt by many of those who are there in the audience, many of those who have grappled with this complex process of how to deal with the past, how to deal with the violence of the past. But the President there very much making the point that both Britain and Ireland now do work together to try to find a way forward and to resolve these issues.
Thanks for now. More to come, as you suggest, including the banquet tonight and then more events tomorrow as well. And that was the address to senior parliamentarians there by Ireland's President. More on that over the course of the evening.
Now, whilst we were listening to that, breaking news coming to us from Reuters from Ukraine, and news that Ukraine's state security services are saying that pro-Russian separatists have placed explosives in a building they seized in the eastern city of Luhansk and are using weapons to hold around 60 people, they say, against their will. They occupied this building on Sunday in the evening to the east of the country, as I say, and in their statement they're saying the anti-terror group of the security services in Ukraine has established the criminals, as they describe them, have mined the building and are holding around 60 people, threatening them with weapons and explosives.
All of this building on huge problems that we've seen, particularly in the east of the country. This is the easternmost part of the country, this particular town, and you will know that in the last day or two they've been talking about Moscow sent out a big warning to Ukraine this morning after Ukraine said that it had carried out a nighttime operation and had got back control of at least one of the buildings that had been taken over by pro-Russia forces, and all of this part of the continuing tension between the two countries, so we'll keep an eye on that.
Yes, we'll talk to our correspondent in the next few minutes on that development. Now, the time is edging out to 10 minutes to 5. A post-mortem examination will be carried out in the next few days on Peaches Geldof, who died suddenly at her home in Kent at the age of 25.
Her father, Bob Geldof,